Hey guys, Yuji here, and sometimes ret can be pretty bad. It can often spend months being undertuned or just bad, so I thought I'd make a video talking about the best ret ults. Now this takes into account two different things. Firstly, playstyle, or how similar does it feel to ret, either win condition wise, damage wise, or utility wise. And secondly, comps. Does it have a lot of synergy with the specs ret likes to play with? So since the three main things ret likes to play with are warriors, hunters, and DHs, we'll be basing it on how well it plays with these three specs. Number 5, Feral Druid. Now Ferals could technically be number 1 if your main partner is a hunter, since jungle is an amazing comp, but overall playstyle wise it's both pretty different and similar to ret in a way it's kind of weird. It's a bleed based control spec, so completely different from ret, but it does have a very similar hit and run playstyle, since if you're the kill target you aren't just going to be ignoring them all game and just W keying into them. You go out, you do your thing, and then you kite for a bit. But rather than just pressing utility buttons to help your teammates, you instead have to peel them with your massive amounts of CC. With 3 different stuns, Root, Cyclone, Knock, and Ursels, you have a tool for pretty much every situation. But having all those tools can definitely increase the skill cap significantly, and it's pretty tough to play defensively compared to a lot of other specs in the game. Now for comps, obviously they have jungle like I mentioned before, but they also have kitty cleave, which isn't always the best, but can often be rank 1 viable. DH Pharaoh, however, has never really worked before as far as I know. Number 4. Enhanced Shaman. Now most people would probably think this spec would be a lot higher, but Enhanced has a similar problem to Feral, where for the most part it only works with warriors. Now a lot of rets have had really good success playing Enhanced ults in the past, Vanguards for one. Enhanced, like ret, has a ton of team utility with grounding and tremor. It also has a ton of other good tools that are strong into a lot of different matchups. Its damage for the most part is pretty similar to ret, being a hybrid of range and melee, and they also generally play the more hit and run playstyle when getting trained. One of the bigger reasons I have it this low though is it really doesn't have good access to a stun or a consistent way to set up goes in the traditional sense. You do have static field to set up big goes for melee cleaves, but just for setting up CC chains with a hunter or something like that, you really don't have anything consistent. Since Cap can always be killed and Lasso isn't super consistent for a melee spec, and you don't run it 90% of the time anyways, it can be kind of awkward in those kinds of comps. But if that isn't really a problem for you, Enhanced could be a really good ult to play. As mentioned before, it doesn't have that good of comps. Beast Cleave hasn't really been a thing since MOP, and Enhanced DH has never been a comp, but Turbo is pretty much always consistent R1 viable comp every single season. So if your main teammate is a warrior, Enhanced is a pretty good ult to play. Number 3. Elemental Shaman. Ellie, like Enhanced, has a ton of team utility with grounding and tremor, along with all of its other tools. It's also a range spec, but a range that doesn't really have to cast too often, with most of its damage being instant proc. It also has all the same benefits and downsides I mentioned from Enhanced. However, it can use a lot of its tools a bit better, using them instead to keep people away from them rather than having to use them to pull them closer for the most part, and a lot of their tools just work out a lot better when trying to keep people away rather than get them to you. It also has a lot more viable comps. Thunder, like Turbo, is pretty much always an R1 viable comp. DH Ellie is often also a R1 viable comp, and even Ellie Hunter has been good from time to time when both specs are really strong, but generally not too often. So overall, Ellie would be a really good ult to play since it works kind of with everything you'd want to play with. Number 2. Devastation Evoker. Now Dev is weirdly pretty similar to ret, or sort of a combination of how ret used to be and how ret is now. It has the massive 2-minute go with Dragon's Rage, and also has Sleepwalk, which is similar to ret. Its damage is also pretty similar to ret's, having all of their buttons be 25 yards range. It has a ton of team utility with Rescue, Time Stop, Cauterizing Flames, and even has a pretty good Stun Fear combo with Deep Breath into Sleepwalk. It can be kind of awkward with all of its damage being casted, but you have so many spell schools that you pretty much always have something to press even when you're kicked. Also, your wall gives you Aura Master, so it makes it so you don't really have to worry about that half the time. It can play in and out pretty well and is a pretty fun and easy spec to play. It also has a pretty good comp with all 3 specs ret plays with. Dev Serve is often a pretty good comp. Dev Warrior is also generally a pretty strong comp. And lastly, Dev TH is often a top tier comp. All around, you can usually make working with any of these 3 specs work out pretty well. Now before we get to number 1, I've got some honorable mentions. First off, we have Boomy. Boomy works amazingly with DH, pretty well with Warrior, and occasionally with Hunter. Its playstyle though can be pretty different compared to ret. Next there is Warrior. Some ret players really enjoy playing ret for the melee part. Warrior is often a pretty good spec to play as an ult. It doesn't really ever work with itself obviously, and only sometimes works well with the other 2. Fire Mage. When it's mainly an instant proc spec, it can be really fun to play. Only really works with Warrior sometimes for the most part though, and pretty much never with the other 2. Rogue. This might just be me, but I have a ton of fun playing Rogue as an all and have had decent success with it. Outlaw is probably one of the most fun specs in the game to play, but Rogue really doesn't pair well with the others comp-wise. Locke generally has a decent comp with all three, but never usually a top tier comp. I'm mainly putting it here because there have been quite a few rep players who have also played Locke and have had decent success with it. SP, like Locke, pairs pretty well with the other three, but has more tools similar to Rhett with MD to get CC and a consistent range stun to set up goes. But that's it for the honorable mentions. Number 1. DK. Specifically Unholy. Now Unholy is slightly weird just for two things. You're a dot spec that needs to stack Festering, and also have two different resources in runes and runic power, but you get used to those things pretty easily. Like Rhett, it's a mixture between range and melee, especially if you're playing Clawing Shadows. Its playstyle feels very similar to Rhett's. It even now has some added utility with Spell Warden being a 30-second AMS for your team to prevent CC and give an additional wall to your teammates. Also AMZ's there for a full team magic reduction, but mainly you just have grip and chains to peel for your teammates rather than actually using support CDs. DK also has a pretty consistent stun blind go and can even swap the stun for a silence when playing comps that already has a stun. Overall, the spec feels pretty natural to play as a rep player, and its comps are pretty amazing. PHDK is often a pretty strong R1 viable comp, at least whenever Hunter's strong. TSG is pretty much always a strong R1 viable comp, and at times both specs best comp. And DHDK is the same, pretty much always an R1 viable comp, and sometimes both those specs best comps. And that's it. Those are the specs that I think make the most sense for a rep player to play. Let me know if you think I got any of them wrong, or if another spec actually fits on this list super well, but that's it. Peace, peace.